My daughter called me at 2:17 in the morning. She didn't say a word. All I heard was wind, cracking ice, and then a sound I will never be able to describe. I grabbed my keys before the call even dropped. By the time I got to Lake Muskoka, the paramedics were already pulling her out. She was alive, barely, and standing 20 feet away, completely dry, was her husband, Derek, watching, not crying, not running to her. Just watching with his hands in his pockets like he was waiting for a bus. I looked at him and something inside me went cold, not like fear, like knowing. She was 4 months pregnant. The water temperature was close to freezing. And the man who swore in front of God and our entire family to protect her was the only other person out there that night. He told the police she slipped. He told them he tried to grab her. He told them he loved her more than anything in this world. And I stood right there, nodding along, letting him speak. Because I already knew something Derek did not. I had been building a file on him for 11 months. And that file was about to become the last thing he ever expected. Before I tell you everything, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly. If someone you loved was slowly being erased by a person they trusted completely, and that person smiled at you every Sunday dinner, how long would you stay quiet to protect the peace? How long before quiet becomes the same thing as helping them? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. Now stay with me, because this story does not go where you think it goes. My name is William. I am 61 years old. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer, which means my entire life has been about looking at things other people walk past every day and asking one question. Where is the weakness? Where is the thing that looks solid but will eventually crack? I am not a dramatic man. I do not look for problems. I do not imagine danger where there is none. But when something is wrong, I feel it in the same place I feel a bad weld or a compromised foundation. I feel it before I can prove it. And then I find the proof. My daughter's name is Claire. She is the most important person in my world. Her mother passed when Claire was 14, and after that it was just the two of us. We figured things out together. We ate cereal for dinner more nights than I want to admit. We watched bad action movies on Friday nights, and she made me watch romantic comedies in return, and I pretended to hate them, but I didn't. She grew up tough and warm and generous in a way that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with who she chose to be. I was proud of her every single day. When Claire was 27, she brought home a man named Derek Ashton. He was 32, good-looking, well-dressed, confident in that particular way that makes older men suspicious and younger women comfortable. He worked in private wealth management. He had a condo in the city and a lease on a car that probably cost more than his salary justified. He shook my hand with both of his hands. He called me sir. He looked me in the eye the whole time. I noticed all of it. I want to be clear about something. I did not dislike Derek because I was being a protective father who could never accept any man for his daughter. I have thought about this carefully, and I know the difference. I disliked Derek because small things did not add up, not big things. Small ones, the kind that most people would call overthinking. The first time I noticed something was about 3 months after they started dating. Claire mentioned that Derek had taken her to a restaurant she loved for her birthday. She mentioned it almost in passing, glowing about how thoughtful he was. A week later, I saw Derek at a gas station near my house. He didn't see me. He was on his phone, laughing, and I caught a few words through my open car window. He was talking to someone about the birthday dinner. But he wasn't describing it the way Claire had described it. He was describing the cost. How much the meal set him back, how he expected something in return for that kind of gesture. His voice had a tone I had never heard from him before, hard, transactional, like he was keeping score. I told myself I might have misheard. I told myself everyone vents. I did not say anything to Claire. They dated for 2 years. He proposed at Christmas. Claire said yes before he finished asking, and she cried and called me immediately, and I told her I was happy because I wanted to be. I wanted to believe I was wrong about what I had heard and felt. I stood at that wedding and I shook Derek's hand at the altar, and I meant it when I said I hoped they would be happy together. I really did. But then the file started. It did not start as a file. It started as a note on my phone. 6 months after the wedding, Claire came to visit me alone on a Tuesday afternoon. She said she just wanted to see me. We drank coffee on the CK porch. She talked about work, about a trip they were planning, about a new recipe she was trying, all normal things, but she kept touching the sleeve of her sweater, pulling it down, adjusting it, not once, not twice, over and over without realizing she was doing it. I noticed but said nothing. When she hugged me goodbye, the sleeve shifted and I saw a bruise on her forearm. Long and dark, the shape of fingers. I did not accuse, I did not ask, I watched. Over the next 4 months, I paid attention in a way I had never paid attention before. I started keeping notes. Dates, observations, small details. A flinch when Derek raised his voice at a football game on television. A canceled plan with me that Claire explained away with an excuse that didn't match what she'd told me 2 days earlier. A Christmas card from a mutual friend that was addressed only to Derek, not to Claire, which told me something about how their social life was being framed to outsiders. A restaurant dinner where Derek interrupted Claire 6 times in 30 minutes, and each time she smiled smaller and smaller and said sorry for no reason. I am an engineer. I document. 11 months into building that file, Claire told me she was pregnant. She was glowing in a way I had not seen in years. She came to tell me alone, same Tuesday coffee, same back porch. She was 4 months along. She said Derek was thrilled. I hugged her and I told her this was the best news I had ever heard, which was true. And I went home that night and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my notes file and I thought about what it meant that a baby was coming. I thought about it for a long time. 3 weeks after that, on a Friday evening, Claire called me from the lake house. They had driven up to Muskoka for the weekend, just the two of them. She sounded a little quiet, but said everything was fine and that the lake was beautiful even in winter and she wished I could see it. I told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. I stayed by my phone that whole evening without fully understanding why. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. I have already told you what happened at the lake. I want to tell you now what happened after. Because that is where the story really begins. At the hospital, Derek sat in the waiting room with me for 4 hours. He brought me a coffee from the machine. He put his hand on my shoulder. He told me the story 3 times. They had gone for a walk along the frozen edge of the lake. Claire had wanted to look at the stars. She slipped on a patch of ice near the water line. He reached for her but couldn't catch her. She went in. He ran to the nearest dock and found a rope and pulled her out. He said he had called 911 immediately. He said it was a miracle. I nodded. I drank the coffee. I did not say a single word that was not calm. Here is what I knew that Derek did not know I knew. 3 months earlier, I had paid for a private investigator. I had not hired him to follow Derek. I had hired him specifically to do one thing: document any incident involving Claire and Derek in physical proximity where Claire's body showed signs of harm. I had not told Claire. I had not told anyone. I had paid out of my own savings. The investigator, a retired police detective named Marsh, had delivered a report 2 weeks before the lake incident. The report included 7 separate documented observations over 11 weeks. Photographs, dates, locations, descriptions. In 3 of the observations, Marsh had documented what he described as controlling physical contact: grabbing of the arm, blocking of an exit. One incident where Derek had put both hands on Claire's shoulders and pushed her into a wall in the parking garage of their building. Marsh had caught it on camera from his car. I had the file, and I had the photographs, but I also knew something else. I knew that what happened at the lake was not an accident, but I could not prove it yet. And I knew that if I moved too fast, Derek would lawyer up. Claire might not cooperate out of fear or loyalty or both, and everything I had built over 11 months could fall apart. So I did what engineers do when they find a structural weakness. I documented more. I strengthened the case before I used it. At the hospital, Claire was treated for hypothermia. The baby was monitored for 12 hours. Both of them survived. Claire was discharged 2 days later. She went home with Derek. I watched them walk to his car, and I said goodbye, and I told her to call me any time, day or night. She smiled at me with the smile that was smaller than it used to be. Derek shook my hand. The door to their car closed. I drove home, sat at my kitchen table, and called Marsh. I told him what had happened. I told him I needed more. I told him I needed anything that pointed to intention rather than accident. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I had not expected. He said that he had already pulled the GPS data from Derek's car, which he had accessed legally through a contact at an insurance firm that carried Derek's policy. Marsh said the car had been parked at the lake house since Friday afternoon, but there was a second data point. Derek's phone had connected to a cell tower 12 kilometers from the lake house at 11:47 p.m., less than 3 hours before the incident, which meant Derek had left the lake house, driven somewhere, and returned before the walk along the lake. I asked Marsh where exactly. He said a bar. A specific bar called the Anchor on Route 7, a bar that I happened to know Claire had mentioned once in passing. She had said a woman Derek worked with went there often. She had said it in the way people say things they want you to hear without asking you to respond to them. I told Marsh to find out who Derek had seen at the Anchor that night. He came back to me in 4 days. Derek had met a woman there. Her name was Priya Nair. She worked at the same wealth management firm. They had been seen together on 6 separate occasions at the Anchor over the past 3 months. A bartender remembered them because they always sat in the back corner, and they always left together, and they were always very close in the way that is not about friendship. I added all of it to the file. But here is the thing about this kind of story that most people do not understand. The affair, the controlling behavior, the lake incident, all of that was one layer. There was another layer underneath it that I was only beginning to see. A financial layer. And that layer was worse in a different way, colder, more deliberate. I want to tell you about Derek's job. He managed private wealth portfolios. He was good at it, or at least he appeared to be. But 3 months into my file, I had started paying attention to something specific. Claire had mentioned once, casually, that Derek had asked her to sign some papers related to a joint investment account they were opening. She said she had signed without reading closely because she trusted him and they were running late for something. I wrote that down. I have a brother-in-law named Paul who is a tax attorney. I trust Paul completely, and he is the kind of man who does not talk unnecessarily. I called Paul 6 months into building my file, and I told him I needed him to look at something confidentially. Paul came to my house on a Saturday. I showed him everything I had. He sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. When he looked up, his face was very still. He said that based on what I had described about the investment account, he believed Derek had potentially structured a joint asset that would convert entirely to Derek's name in the event of Claire's death. He said he needed to see the actual documents to confirm, but the description matched a pattern he had seen before in estate manipulation cases. He said if Claire died, and if the account existed the way I had described, Derek would walk away with everything she had put in, plus whatever the account had earned, with no probate challenge possible because of how it was structured. I stared at Paul for a long moment. I asked him how much was in Claire's accounts. He did not know. I did not know either. But I knew something else. Claire's grandmother had passed 3 years earlier and had left Claire a trust, a very significant trust. Claire had mentioned it only once to me, briefly, saying that the money was safe and she didn't really think about it. I had not thought about it either, until that moment at my kitchen table with Paul. I asked Paul how we found out more. He told me the first step was to get a copy of the investment account document. I asked him how we did that without tipping Derek off. Paul said the cleanest route was through Claire, but only if she was ready to hear the truth. He asked me if she was. I said I didn't know. I said she wasn't there yet. Paul nodded and said then we find another route. It took us 6 more weeks. Paul found the other route through the wealth management firm's compliance filings, which are semi-public in certain jurisdictions. It took a detailed request and a very specific set of legal contacts, but Paul found a document trail, and what he found made the investment account look small. Derek had, over the course of 2 years, moved a significant portion of Claire's trust into a series of investment vehicles that were technically jointly held, but structured with beneficiary designations that bypassed standard inheritance rules. If Claire died without a will that specifically contradicted those designations, and she did not have a current will because Derek had told her they should wait until after the baby to update their estate documents, Derek would receive everything. Everything from the trust, everything from the joint accounts, everything. Paul laid it out slowly and clearly at my kitchen table, and I sat very still. I am not a man who cries easily. I did not cry. I felt something that was colder than anger. It was feeling of a structure finally showing you its full failure mode. That moment when all the small cracks you documented connect into one single line of collapse. I asked Paul what we needed to stop it. He said we needed 3 things. First, Claire needed a new will, drafted immediately, that explicitly overrode the beneficiary designations Derek had arranged. Second, we needed to document the financial manipulation in a way that could survive legal scrutiny. Third, we needed to present everything to Claire at the right moment, in the right way, with the right support around her, so she could make a fully informed decision without Derek present. I said I understood. I said I would handle the timing. Paul said there was one more thing. He said that given the lake incident and Marsh's documentation of the physical incidents and the financial structure he had uncovered, there was a pattern here that a specific kind of attorney would want to see. Not just a family law attorney, a criminal one. I told him I had been thinking the same thing. I want to stop here for a moment and tell you something about that period. The weeks between finding the financial truth and deciding how to move were the hardest of my life. Harder in some ways than losing Claire's mother, because this was not grief. This was the specific torture of knowing something that the person you love does not know, and understanding that the moment you tell them, their entire sense of safety, their idea of their own marriage, their hope about the family they are building, all of it will shatter. And you are the one who has to hand them the hammer. I thought about Claire every single day. I thought about her choosing this man. I thought about the ways she had loved him and the ways she had defended him to herself and probably to others. I thought about the way she pulled her sleeve down on that back porch. I thought about the smaller and smaller smiles. I thought about her standing in front of me saying she was pregnant and glowing in a way she had not glowed in years, as if the baby was her answer to everything. And I thought about what Derek had done, what he had planned, and what he had almost finished. I did not move until I was completely ready. That is the only power I had, and I was not going to waste it by moving too soon. I called an attorney named Sandra Reeves. She was recommended to me by Paul. She had 20 years of experience in family law, estate law, and had worked with the Crown's attorney office on 2 financial abuse cases involving spouses. She was calm, methodical, and when I walked her through everything over 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon, she did not once look surprised. She told me this was not the first time she had seen this pattern. She told me what we had was strong. She told me the financial documentation combined with the investigator's physical documentation, and the lake incident created something that most attorneys only see in pieces but rarely together this clearly. She said we needed to move on all fronts simultaneously. The reason for that was strategy. If Derek found out about the financial investigation before the family law protections were in place, he had the ability to move assets. If he found out about the physical documentation before the criminal complaint was filed, he would lawyer up and coaching Claire would become impossible. Everything had to happen at once. One coordinated day. Sandra gave me a timeline. She gave me a list of exactly what needed to happen and in what order. She told me the most important step was still the same one Paul had identified, telling Claire. And she said she wanted to be in the room when I did. I called Claire on a Monday morning. I told her I wanted to have lunch, just the 2 of us, at my house. I told her I had something I wanted to talk to her about. She said she would be there Thursday. She sounded a little careful on the phone, the way she always sounded when I called outside our normal rhythm, but she said yes without pushing me for details. I think some part of her had been waiting for this conversation longer than either of us wanted to admit. On Thursday morning, I set the table the way her mother used to set it. I made the pasta Claire had loved since she was small. I put flowers in the center because her mother always put flowers in the center. I wanted her to walk into a room that felt safe. I wanted the first thing she felt to be home. She came at noon. We ate. We talked about the baby. She was showing more now, and she put her hands on her stomach when she talked about the nursery they were painting and the name they were considering. I listened. I let her finish. I let the meal end, and I let us move to the back porch with coffee. And then I looked at her and said the words I had been preparing for months. I said, Claire, I need to show you some things. And I need you to let me show you everything before you react, because some of it is going to be very RD to hear, and I need you to still be listening at the end. She put down her coffee. She looked at me, and she said, Dad, how long have you known? I want to tell you about that moment because it matters more than anything else in this story. She already knew, not everything, not the financial details or the full scope, but she knew. She had known something was wrong for a long time, and she had been carrying it alone because she thought she had no way out, and she thought no one would believe her, and she thought the baby changed everything, and she thought she owed it to her marriage to keep trying. She had been in the water long before she fell into that lake. She had just been too cold and too tired to name it. I took her hand. I told her she was not alone. I told her I had been paying attention, and then I opened the file. We sat on that back porch for 4 hours. Sandra joined us at 2 in the afternoon. Claire cried for a long time. She was angry. She was confused. She kept saying things like I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know it was this, and she kept looking at the financial documents with a face that moved through disbelief and recognition, and finally a very quiet fury. Sandra was steady the whole time. She explained everything clearly. She told Claire exactly what her rights were. She told her what the next steps looked like. She told her that the goal was to protect her, protect the baby, protect her financial security, and hold Derek accountable through every available legal channel. She told Claire the choice about how far to go was entirely Claire's. She was not being pushed. She was being given the truth and the tools, and then she could decide. Claire was quiet for a long time after Sandra finished. She was looking at the garden. Then she asked one question. She asked if the baby would be okay. Sandra said yes. She said the baby was protected and that Claire's health and the baby's well-being were the absolute first priority in every step of the plan. Claire nodded. She looked at me. She said okay. That was the word, okay, one word, and in it was everything. Every morning she had smiled when she didn't feel like smiling. Every sleeve she had pulled down. Every call where she'd said everything's fine, Dad. Every smaller smile. Every excuse she had made for a man who was slowly, carefully, deliberately dismantling her life while looking her in the eye and telling her he loved her. Okay. We moved the next morning. Sandra filed the emergency family law protections before Derek's office opened. Paul filed the documents that froze the disputed financial assets pending an estate fraud investigation. Marsh submitted his full documented file, photographs and GPS data and observations to Sandra's office and to a contact at the Ontario Provincial Police. I picked up Claire from the home she shared with Derek at 7 in the morning with 2 of her friends who had agreed to help without knowing the full details, and I moved her into my house with the things she needed most. Her laptop, her documents, her mother's jewelry, 3 bags of clothes. She did not cry when she walked out of that house. She was very still and very focused, the way people get when they have made a decision they cannot undo and they know it. I held the door for her. She walked to my car without looking back. Derek called her 17 times that morning. She did not answer. He called me 3 times. I did not answer. He called Paul. Paul answered and said calmly and clearly that he was not at liberty to discuss anything and that any further contact should be directed to Sandra Reeves. He read out Sandra's number and ended the call. We know Derek called Sandra that afternoon because Sandra told us. She said he was calm on the phone, controlled. He asked what was happening. He said there must be some misunderstanding. He said Claire was going through a hard time and was not thinking clearly because of the pregnancy. Sandra said she would be in touch with his attorney and ended the call. Derek hired one of the most expensive family law attorneys in Toronto within 48 hours. We had expected that. Sandra had prepared for it. What Derek had not expected was the OPP contact. An investigator reached out to Derek directly, not through his attorney, as part of a preliminary inquiry into the lake incident. The investigator had Marsh's report, the GPS data showing Derek's car and phone movements that night, and a statement from the bartender at the Anchor. He had 3 separate documented physical incidents from Marsh's photographs. And he had the medical record from the hospital showing Claire's treatment for acute hypothermia and the monitoring of her unborn child following the incident. Derek's attorney tried to shut it down quickly. Sandra told me that was exactly what a guilty person's attorney does when they realize the net is already around them. They do not ask questions. They try to make everything stop before it can be. Heard, it did not stop. The OPP investigation took 11 weeks. I want to be honest with you about what happened and what did not happen, because this story is not a fantasy, and real life does not always give you the ending you want in the way you want it. Derek was not charged with attempted murder. The evidence of intent was strong in our minds, but the standard of proof required for that charge is extremely high. The investigation determined that the circumstantial case around the lake incident was not sufficient for that specific charge. That was hard to accept. I will not pretend otherwise. But Derek was charged. He was charged with criminal harassment. He was charged with assault causing bodily harm based on Marsh's documented physical incidents, specifically the parking garage photograph. He was charged with financial fraud related to the beneficiary designation manipulation, a charge that Paul had flagged and that the Financial Crimes Unit confirmed after reviewing everything he had submitted. 3 separate charges, real ones, documented ones, ones that could not be quietly dismissed. His attorney pushed for a plea. Sandra told us about the offer. A fine, probation, no criminal record for the assault charge if he agreed to civil remedies on the financial fraud. Claire made the decision. It was hers to make. She sat with Sandra for a long time. She was 7 months pregnant by then. She was living in my house. She was calm and she was clear, and she was the woman her mother would have been proud of. She said no to the plea on the assault charge. She said she wanted the financial fraud charge to carry full civil penalties. She said she was prepared to testify to everything. I do not have words for how proud I was of her in that moment. I just do not. Derek accepted a modified agreement in the end. He pleaded to the financial fraud charge and a reduced assault charge. He received a criminal conviction on both counts. The financial remedies were significant. Claire's trust assets were fully restored with interest. The beneficiary designations were voided. A family court order gave Claire full legal separation of all joint assets, and a protection order prohibited Derek from contacting her or coming within a set distance of her home. He did not go to prison, I will tell you that plainly. Some people will hear this story and feel that justice was incomplete. I understand that. I felt it too in moments. But I also know what Claire has. She has her life. She has her financial security. She has a legal record against the man who hurt her. She has a protection order. She has her baby. And she has the truth on record in the eyes of the law, which means Derek Ashton is not invisible anymore. What he did is documented. What he is known. I want to tell you about what happened with Derek after the agreement was signed because people always want to know. He did not disappear quietly. That is not what people like Derek do. About 3 weeks after the legal proceedings concluded, Derek sent a letter to Claire through his attorney. I saw it because Claire showed it to me. In the letter, Derek said he had made mistakes. He said he had been under enormous pressure. He said he loved her and loved their child and wanted to be part of their lives. He said he hoped one day she would understand. He asked for a chance to explain himself. Claire read the letter once. She folded it neatly. She handed it to Sandra without writing a single word in response. 2 weeks after that, Derek's mother called me directly. She had gotten my number through a mutual family connection. She left a voicemail. She said Derek was struggling. She said she knew things had gone wrong, but that he was her son and she was worried about him. She said she hoped she used my name, she said she hoped William would find it in his heart to help facilitate some kind of communication between Derek and Claire for the sake of the child. I called her back. Once. I was polite. I told her I was sorry that she was in pain. I told her that her son had made choices that had consequences and that those consequences were not reversible because of love or family or worry. I told her that Claire's well-being and the baby's well-being were the only priority and that would not change. I told her I wished her well and I ended the call. She called one more time. I let it go to voicemail. I did not return it. Derek's name came up one more time before the baby was born. His attorney sent a formal request for visitation rights and acknowledgement of paternity, which was legally necessary to address. Sandra handled it. A family court agreement was reached that established Derek's legal obligations and a limited, structured process for his involvement, contingent entirely on his compliance with the protection order and all other court conditions. Sandra told us Derek had wept in the hallway of the courthouse after the hearing. His attorney had to speak to him for several minutes before he could compose himself. I do not know what to do with that information. I held it for a long time. I am still holding it. There is no version of this story where I feel satisfaction at a man weeping in a hallway. But there is a version where I understand that the weight of what you choose eventually finds you. That is not revenge. That is just gravity. Claire gave birth on a bright Tuesday in March. A girl. She named her Rose, which was her mother's middle name and the name I would have chosen if anyone had asked me. She was small and healthy, and when Claire put her in my arms for the first time, I stood very still. I am 61 years old and I have not cried easily since I was young, but I cried then. I stood in that hospital room with Rose in my arms and Claire watching me from the bed, and I cried without being ashamed of it. This is what I was protecting. This small person who did not yet know what the world had tried to take from her before she even arrived. This is what all those months of files and notes and quiet conversations and hard decisions had been for. Not revenge, not satisfaction, not winning. This. I want to tell you the honest version of what the aftermath looked like, not the version that ties everything into a clean bow, because real life does not always give you clean bows. Claire had hard days, a lot of them. She had days where she questioned herself, days where she wondered if she had done the right thing, days where she missed something she thought she had, even knowing that thing was never real. Grief does not care how justified your decisions were. It does not excuse itself because you were right. She had to go through all of it, and she did. She found a therapist she trusted, a woman who specialized in coercive control and financial abuse. She went every week for the first year. She was honest with that therapist in ways she had never been honest with anyone. That work changed her in ways I cannot fully describe from the outside, but I can see the difference. I can see it in the way she talks about herself now, the way she answers questions without looking to see if the answer is acceptable first, the way she laughs. I sold a piece of investment property that year and I gave half of it to Claire to supplement the trust recovery. She tried to refuse. I told her I did not ask for her opinion. She laughed. It was the first real laugh I had heard from her in a long time, and it was worth more than the property. My relationship with Paul deepened through all of this in a way I had not expected. We had always been cordial in the way that in-laws are cordial. After this, we were something closer. He came over for dinner more often. We talked about things that had nothing to do with law. He told me once that he had never seen anyone build a case with the patience I had, and I told him I had learned it from building things that had to hold weight. He understood that. Marsh, the investigator, sent me a card when Rose was born, just a card. It said, "Congratulations, William, she is safe." That was all it said. I kept it. Sandra did not have a personal relationship with us after the case concluded, which is professional and right. But she sent a brief note when the final proceedings were settled. She said it had been one of the most complete files she had ever seen walk into her office. She said she hoped Claire and the baby were well. I wrote back and said they were. I have thought a great deal about what I would say to someone who is sitting right now where I was sitting at the beginning of this story, watching a person they love, noticing things, writing things down, wondering if they are wrong, wondering if they are making something out of nothing, wondering if staying quiet is protecting the person or protecting the peace at the person's expense. I want to say this carefully because I do not want to give advice that oversimplifies something that is never simple. Pay attention to the small things, not because you are looking for a reason to distrust someone, but because love without attention is just assumption. The people who hurt the people we love rarely do it all at once. They do it slowly. They do it in the spaces between the big moments. They do it in the ways that are easy to excuse because each one alone seems like nothing. The sleeve pulled down, the interrupted sentence, the document signed without reading, the call at 2 a.m. These things are connected. When they form a pattern, the pattern is the truth. Document, not because you plan to use it. Document because documentation is the difference between knowing something and being able to prove it. The two are not the same. And in the situations where it matters most, they cannot be treated as the same. Do not move until you are ready. I know how hard it is to sit on what you know. I know the specific weight of watching someone you love and knowing something they do not know. I know the nights. I know what that SDS, but moving too early out of grief or anger or the need to do something is how cases collapse and how people who need protection lose the only chance they had. And finally this. When the person you are protecting is finally ready to hear the truth, make the room feel like home first. Not because the truth needs softening. It does not. But because the person hearing it needs to know they are not alone before the floor drops out from under them. Make sure the room says, "You are safe here." This person loves you. You are not at the end. You are at the beginning. Claire is 31 now. Rose is almost 2.5. She has her grandmother's eyes. She says Dad's name, which is what she calls me, better than any other word in her vocabulary. She says it with authority, like she already knows I will come when she calls. Derek pays his child support on schedule. He has supervised visits according to the court agreement. He has not violated the protection order. I do not know what his life looks like beyond those facts, and I do not need to. I still have the file, all of it. Every photograph, every document, every note. I keep it in a locked drawer in my office. I do not look at it. I do not need to, but I keep it because some things should be preserved exactly as they were so that no one can ever look back and say it didn't happen or it wasn't that bad or maybe you remembered it wrong. It happened. It was that bad. I did not remember it wrong. My name is William. I am 61 years old. I am a structural engineer, and the most important structure I ever built was the case that kept my daughter alive. She is alive. Her daughter is alive. The lake is frozen again this year. Claire sent me a photograph of Rose in a red coat standing at the edge of a different lake, a small one near my house, throwing bread to ducks. Claire is standing behind her, one hand on Rose's shoulder, laughing. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then I put it in the spot on my desk where I can see it every day, right next to the card from Marsh. Right next to the small photo of Claire's mother that I have kept in the same place for 17 years. If this story stayed with you, I want you to do one thing before you leave. Think about someone in your life right now who might be pulling their sleeve down when they think no one is watching. Not every silence is peace. Not every smile means fine. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is to simply pay attention. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it. And if something in this story felt familiar, I am asking you to reach out to someone you trust. You do not have to carry what you are carrying alone. The comments are open and I read them. Thank you for staying all the way to the end.